are blessed today to have Ajaan Suchart Abhijato join us for our Clear Mountain Monastery conversation this morning. I'll read a short biography of Ajaan, and then Nisabo and I will begin asking questions. So Ajaan Suchart Abhijato is one of the most globally well-known and well-respected monks in Thailand. Born in 1947 in Chonburi, Thailand, Ajaan Suchart attended California State University, Fresno, where he studied civil engineering. After returning to Thailand, Ajaan was inspired by an English Dhamma book on impermanence to search for a true path to happiness through formal ordination as a Buddhist monk. At the age of 27, he was ordained at Wat Yannasangwararam in Bangkok, with the late Supreme Patriarch as his preceptor. About 6 weeks after ordination, Ajaan Suchart traveled to Wat Yannasangwararam to live and train with Longta Mahabua Jnana Sampano, the preeminent forest meditation monk at that time. Once there, he stayed there for the next 9 years. After his time at Wat Yannasangwararam, and after staying in Pattaya for some time, Ajaan Suchart moved to Wat Yannasangwararam in Chonburi in 1984 and has resided there until present. Ajaan Suchart is the author of numerous Dhamma books, including Real Happiness, Sensual Pleasures Are Painful, and the autobiography My Way. He now teaches internationally, both in Thai and English languages. So Ajaan, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Ajaan. So maybe to begin with, in reading your biography, I was learning when you stayed with Longta Mahabua, he would give very long Dhamma talks, maybe 2-hour long Dhamma talks. And I'm curious if you could talk about how to listen to the Dhamma, what to do with your mind when hearing Dhamma.
Well, we're just mindful of listening to his talk. Everybody will be sitting quietly, as if nobody is there. Everybody is so quiet. And we didn't have any electricity. So we just have a couple candles on the shrine in front of the Buddha Rupa as lighting. But we don't need any light really, because we're using the light of Dhamma, which is the teaching of the Ajahn. He normally gives us a formal 1-hour talk first. He will start with whatever he wants to talk. And then he'll just usually about Sila, the Vinaya of the monks, how monks should behave, and then do Thanga practice. And then he will go into the detail of the practicing of mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom eventually. And that will be about 1 hour or so, more or less. Then we will take a break for Ajaan Panya Vato, which is an English monk, have a chance to give a recap in English to a few Westerner monks who were there, maybe about 10 minutes or so. During that time, we just sit down and wait, and Ajaan take a break and have his drink of water and chew some betel nuts. And then when Tanvaya was done, then Ajaan will then talk informally, just like talking to you right now, about his practices at various times and his experiences with Ajaan and so forth. And until about maybe for another hour or so, that will be about 2 hours. Then we will then just disperse and go back to our kutis and do more practices. Because usually after we listen to his Dhamma talk, we got more inspiration, more energy to do the practice. Before listening to the Dhamma talk, we are just about out of energy. So when we listen to his talk, somehow it revitalizes our spirit and make us have the energy to continue on practicing for a few hours more. So this is, and normally when I first went there, he gave about a talk once every 5 or 6 days. That was the time when he he wasn't involved much with the lay people yet.
Mm.
And his health was in ship shape, so he could call a meeting. But he won't tell you in advance when the meeting's gonna be.
Mm.
So you have to be prepared. Usually comes in the dusk after sunset, when it begins to get dark. Then he'll send a monk to go and tell us we're gonna have a meeting. And as soon as we heard the word, we have to run because we don't want him to wait for us.
Mm.
And when we got there, we just place the sitting mat and so forth, and then just sit and wait until everybody's there, which doesn't take too long because everybody more or less was anticipating the talk.
Mm.
And so when we were all there, then Ajahn would then start talking.
Ajahn, when you would listen to his talks, I had read that you practiced a lot of Buddha mantra recitation, Buddha practice. When you would listen to his talks, would you recite your meditation, or would you try to really be like thinking about what he's saying?
Or you have to think what he's saying, or at least pay attention to what he said. Never use the mantra when you're listening to a Dhamma talk,
Okay.
because it will be interfering.
Okay.
Because Dhamma talk is more precious than reciting Buddha at that time.
Wow.
You can recite Buddha while you're alone. But when you're listening to Dhamma talk, you want to concentrate on listening to the Dhamma talk.
Wow.
Or else you won't understand what he was talking about.
Ajahn, I've heard that Longtha Mahabua's Dhamma talks, I believe Ajahn Panyavato is speaking to the fact that one's questions, or maybe it was Ajahn Dick, the actual content of the talk sometimes wasn't all that was relevant, in that people could be listening and there was just a power in Longtha Mahabua's voice. And sometimes people's questions would be resolved just from listening to an hour. Can the voice of Dhamma speak in this way? It's not something we're familiar with in the West. And what are your thoughts on that quality of speaking Dhamma?
I think it depends on each individual who listens. Maybe have different effect upon them. But for me, it's the understanding of his talk that gives me the wisdom, the insight as to what you need to do to be able to achieve the result from your practice. So for me, it's more the talk, the content of the talk, not the power of the voice or anything like that. But maybe different people have different effect. Maybe it depends on the level of the practice also. Some, if you're just there trying to develop mindfulness and samadhi, you might not need much to listen to understand, because you want something to maybe push your mindfulness, push your mind to calm. But if you're on the level of understanding, you want to understand what the Dhamma practice is about, then you need to listen and then think about what he said as he said, so that you can see the picture and understand what you need to do in your practice.
Ajahn, what was most meaningful to you in the figure of Longtha Mahabua as a teacher? You know, what inspired faith in you at first in going forward, and what kind of were the most meaningful qualities to you about him as a teacher?
Well, to be honest, I didn't know him at the time of my ordination. Yeah. But then while I was staying at Wat Yannasangwararam, I met a few Westerners who went up and came back to Wat from Bata and mentioned about Ajahn Mahabua. And I got a chance to read the book by Ajahn Panyavato, Wisdom Develops Samadhi. So I can get some inkling of what the Ajahn Mahabua's teaching is about. But previously I was dependent on the teaching of the Buddha himself. I read the Satipatthana Sutta That's the sutta I used to be my manual of practice. Follow the development of mindfulness using the body, kaya kata sati, and anapanasati when sitting in meditation. So I didn't really know anything about the forest Thai tradition at all. But I was just looking for a place to practice. I was practicing for about a year at home, and I found that I need to grow more, and I need to go live in a monastery and become a monk. So I had to, first I ordained, and then I started looking for a monastery, and I found out the Thai tradition, forest tradition, and Ajaan Mahabua or Lungta Mahabua was somehow easily accessible for me at that time because of the recommendation of the monks who had been visited there, and they told me how to get there. So I wrote a letter to Ajaan Suchart and asked permission to go pay a visit, really. Because my goal was to look for a place to practice. I didn't want to be involved in any rituals or any chanting or any invitation and so forth. Just want to do the practice. I need a quiet place. As far as teacher, I wasn't that much looking for, because I thought I had a teacher from what I read from the sutta. I read just a few sutta, the first discourse, the Dhamma Vatana Sutta, the Anatalakana Sutta, the Atitaya Sutta, and the Satipatthana Sutta. So that's pretty much what I needed to guide me in my practice. So at that time, I was looking for a place to practice more than a teacher. But after having been there, I realized having a teacher is much more precious, because there are lots of things, lots of ways of practice that isn't shown in the suttas. So like fasting and sitting for a long time to overcome your pain of your body. So this is something that you learn from your teacher. Ajaan Mahabua practiced sitting all night, for instance, to endure the painful feeling of the body. And he also did a lot of fasting to stimulate his practice. And also living in the wild, alone in the wild. These are something that I haven't thought of before when I was practicing at home. So I gained a lot of precious tips and from being with a teacher. And also the way he drives us to practice, to be mindful. Every time we are around him, we have to be very mindful, because if we do something wrong, we could be corrected right there in front of everybody.
That's
can
quite
be
legendary.
Yeah. So everybody's quite nervous or quite on their toes when they are in front of him. But he meant well. He didn't hurt or have any try to harm us or anything like that.
Tanajaan, how would you maintain inspiration if Lungta Mahabua was giving talks, say every 2 weeks? How would you, or every week, how would you maintain your inspiration in between the talks?
Well, by keep on practicing, because as you practice and you start to realize the result of your practice, you become inspired, you become more convinced of the path. Besides that, I also have his books. I spend about 1 hour every day reading his books. I read almost all of his books. So I know pretty much what he was teaching. Every day I will be reading about 1 hour. And he wrote a book about the Patipata, which is the practices of the Ajahn Mun's disciples. So there was a lot of tips in there as to what to do. So I didn't really need to join the meeting really, because I already had my own meeting with him every day by reading his book.
Thanajaan, what do you recommend for monks or for serious practitioners in terms of study? You were doing about an hour of studying the biography of the Kruba Ajahn or their teachings, and also studying the sutras. Do you recommend that for anyone, or does it depend on the person?
Well, I wouldn't say I would recommend it to anybody, but I think if you have good books that can guide you in your meditation, I think it's worthwhile to read them. And so I was fortunate to run into Ajahn Mahabhuas, who, in my mind, I think he knows everything about the practice, and everything he said or wrote in the books are very precious for me. It helped me, guide me in my practice, inspire me, and keep me on track. Yeah. Because I was something already I was looking for, is to concentrate all my effort on the practice of meditation. I don't want to get involved in any other extra spiritual work like construction or doing any other type of work. And I was fortunate to run into him because he wants monks to meditate, to practice. And he tried to keep all the other works to the minimum, which was very good for me. This is what I was looking for. So, and then I also have his books to read. So I get all the things I need: a place to practice and instruction as to how to do the proper practice.
Tanajan, you speak about Longtam Mahabhua's, how you feel like he had practiced through the whole scope of the practice. And I've been struck by the talks, many of which you've translated, and I've listened to your translations of Longtam Mahabhua speaking about aspects of the mind and awakening that I've never heard spoken to so clearly elsewhere. And I remember specifically one instance where he talks about a state beyond space and time. And I wondered if you had any, most Westerners, when they think of the word cessation or, cooling, nibbana, there's sort of this intuition of cold blankness. I wonder how you would respond to a perception like that, and specifically in relationship to Longtam Mahabhua's own descriptions of states that most of us have not had access to.
Well, this is the state you access in your meditation, when your mind eventually enter into the fourth jhana. That's when your thoughts stop functioning temporarily, and all that you have left is the emptiness of mental space, which comparable to the physical space when you're in space. So when you're there, you will be all alone. All that is left is you or the knower. Actually, there's no you anymore, because the you was a mental fabrication. Once the mental fabrication stopped functioning, your thought and the you disappear, and all you have left is just the knower, knowing the emptiness and the state of equanimity within the mind itself. So this is what you will experience when you eventually got to that point.
How does one move from that to liberation?
You don't. This is the end of meditation. Really. This is the result that once you get is to get calm, peacefulness, equanimity, and a sense of peace and happiness from this state, which the Buddha described as the happiness that arises from a calm mind, excels all types of happiness. Once you have this, then you have something to bargain with your defilements. Your defilement wants to look for happiness, but it wants to look through the sensual objects. But if you study the teaching, you realize that the sensual objects are all have the three characteristics as its character. It is dukkha because it's temporary, it's not permanent. You might enjoy a meal, but once it's gone, and you're left hungry and empty again, and left you desiring for more. And when you cannot get it, then you become unhappy. So this is the thing that you can down bargain and say, you don't need to have happiness from sensual objects anymore. All you have to do is go into jhana anytime you feel like you want to have happiness. But the only drawback about jhana is it's not permanent. You have to keep going back to get that happiness from peace of mind. And so if you want to have this type of happiness to be permanent, we need to develop vipassana or wisdom to eliminate the defilement, which are the ones that destroy the peace that we gain from jhana. Because when we come out of jhana, when we start to think, the defilement will start coming up again. And it will eventually drag us to go look for something, to see or to hear, to drink or to smell or so forth, without even knowing it, because we've been so used to looking for this type of happiness all the time. But once we have this happiness, the other type of happiness that we can experience from meditation, then we can then use the wisdom that Buddha teaches us to develop, is to see the three characteristics in the objects that your defilement wants to have, that it is going to hurt you sooner or later. It's going to give you dukkha because of their temporary nature or their uncertain nature. They keep constantly changing. From good can be bad, right? Same thing that you get, at first you get it, it's good, but then a few days later it might break down, or you might lose it. So this is the nature of things that we want to teach the mind every time we desire or crave for them. And they are temporarily happiness because they keep changing and they are not under your control, right? Anatta, not under your control. You cannot say this thing gonna be like this all the time. Because it can change or it can disappear anytime without any warning. So this is when you teach your mind to see, so that what you crave for is not real happiness. It's real dukkha without knowing it. It's dukkha in disguise, and a form of happiness, of pleasure. They're like drugs. People get addicted to drugs. They thought, this is pleasure, right? To smoke a joint or to take some whatever pills they have. You're high for a few hours. And then after that, the effect of the drugs disappear. Then you're back down. And then you feel lonely and feel sad and feel the desire to need to go back up again. And so you can become addicted. And then anytime when you cannot get what you're addicted to, then what you get dukkha, suffering. So everything is like this. This is what you want to teach your mind.
Ajaan, how would one know the difference between, say, a refined brightness like fourth jhana and the state of full awakening?
Well, awakening is something when you come out of dukkha with wisdom. When you're sitting and your body becomes so painful and your mind becomes so miserable from the pain. But as you apply wisdom and see that the pain is anicca, impermanent, it's anatta, something you cannot control or force it. So the only thing you can do is to live with it, to leave it alone. See, when your mind eventually let go of your attachment to the pain or your desire of wanting to get rid of the pain has subsided, then your mind becomes peaceful and happy. That's awakening. See? Dukkha disappear. You see the Four Noble Truths within yourself. See, dukkha arises from your cravings for the pain to disappear. But as you apply wisdom to see that the pain is beyond your control, all you can do is to leave it alone. Once your mind let go and leave the pain alone, then your mind has cessation, has nirodha. The dukkha that arises in the mind disappear. Not the dukkha in the body, not the pain in the body. The pain in the body can still remain there, but it doesn't affect the body, doesn't affect the mind anymore. The mind can live, coexist with the pain of the body. That's what awakening is. You have to see the Four Noble Truths. In this sense, I'm giving you an example of the painful feeling of your body.
Ajaan, you talk about the name of one of your books is Sensual Pleasures Are Painful. And that's something which, for many Westerners who are new to Buddhism, that's all they know. That's all most people know. Yeah. And how do you teach people who are new to Buddhism? If they hear that, they might just think, what else is there? They don't yet have faith, or they don't have experience with meditative states. How do you teach the drawback?
Teaching them how to meditate. What else, Because it's not that difficult. I started meditation by myself just from reading books. Just follow the instruction. Just be mindful of your breath. And don't let your mind go somewhere else. And if you can continue doing this for a few minutes, your mind can become calm right away. So for me, meditation is quite simple, even though I had never done it before. But when I first started doing it, it seems to be quite easy.
So showing people just how to experience the peace of meditation can show people.
That's right. Once you have experienced the peace from meditation, the happiness or the bliss you get from meditation, then you say, I don't need anything else. I got happiness within myself. It's just a matter of bringing it out, bring it to appear in my mind. And all I need to do is stop thinking by using mindfulness. That's all.
Ajaan, the title of one of your books is Tat Ru, or the knowing element. And in that book, you also use another name for this, which is Gai Tip, or like the divine body. And I'd never heard that term before. What is this? Either the divine body or the knowing element? How does one?
Well, see, the knowing element is the mind, which doesn't exist in the body. Okay, the mind exists in another world. We call it the spiritual world or divine world, whatever the terms you want to use. But it's not in the physical world like the body. The mind and the body are connected through the vijnana from the mind. This is how the mind receives the objects coming into the body, the sensual organs, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. And then it's connected to the mind through vijnana in the nama khanda. We call consciousness. Okay, but the mind never is in the physical world. The mind is not in the world where the body is living. Even if this whole world exploded because of some catastrophic phenomena, the world will just explode. It won't catch the mind. It won't affect the mind. Because the mind isn't in the world. It's only the body that will be exploded along with the world. But the mind is in a different place, in the spiritual world. So sometimes we call this Gai Tip, which is the spiritual body or divine body. It depends on how people translate the term Gai Tip. I always compare the mind like someone on this earth controlling a spacecraft. someone who controls the spacecraft isn't in the spacecraft. You send, and whatever happens to the spacecraft doesn't affect the controller.
It's like a drone.
Like, and the mind is like a controller of the body. See?
Wow.
So whatever happens to the body doesn't affect the mind. Physically, what happens to the body doesn't affect the mind. But due to the illusion of the mind, to think that it is the body, that's when the mind becomes hurt because of delusion, because of misunderstanding of the truth.
Thank you, Thanajan. So I think some people are sometimes confused about the difference between Nibbana Dhatu, Nibbana Tat, and the knowing element. Are they the same thing or are they different?
It is the knowing element that has achieved Nibbana by purification, by getting rid of the defilements of greed, hate, and delusion through the practice of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. See, we all have this mind which called the knowing element. But for us, we still have delusional element, delusion in this knowing element, which causes us to have greed and hatred, which causes us to go after things, which causes us to take rebirth because of our greed, our cravings for things. But when someone like the Buddha, who through his own wisdom discovered this truth, that the mind can be purified and can be happy and doesn't have to take rebirth anymore. So this is what the Buddha, when he was practicing, he had to find out by himself because no one in this world know how to do it. So he purified his knowing element, and he called this knowing element Nibbana.
Okay, so
Purified
Nibbana, the Nibbana element is the purified knowing element with no
That's
ignorance.
right. Yeah, no rebirth. It doesn't take any rebirth anymore in the three realms of existence or samsara.
Thanajan, you speak about watching the world and the rest of us and us, and how we chase after these suffering disguised as happiness, and the true value of the Buddha's teachings as one perspective apart from that. And after living apart from the world and its dynamic for so long, I wonder how you feel when you look at the world and those in it, and sort of chasing after this and that. Like, what are your reflections on this situation we all find ourselves in, and maybe even this specific moment in history?
Well, we're just chasing after the shadow, our own shadow. We always think that we can catch our own shadow and become happy. But as soon as we start moving toward our shadow, it starts to move away from us. So our craving, our delusion think that for us to have things in this world like wealth or happiness will make us happy. But as soon as we catch it, we don't feel happy anymore, right? We feel this, we need something more to make us happy. We might be happy just for a few hours, a few days. But after a while, then we feel that it's no longer like when you first get it. So you always have to have something new to make you feel happy. So you keep chasing after this thing. Never ending.
Thanajan, you speak about how, meditation was very simple in some sense for you. And I remember reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, that first year of practice, you basically sat in your basement and practiced alone and managed to meditate many, many hours a day. And to be honest, as I think for many Westerners and perhaps many modern people, that just things don't go like that completely right off the bat. And I wonder if you did have, what have you found to be effective instruction for kind of us modern, overly thinking, that the situation many of us find ourselves in, where a regimen of practice like that is quite hard. And how would you recommend, say, a modern person approach these refined states of concentration? What are skillful means we can use?
Just stop thinking. So as soon as you realize you're talking to yourself, tell yourself to stop. You can use the mantra to help you. If you feel you're talking to yourself, and say, why don't you talk to the mantra instead? It's good. Focus on what you do. I usually use focusing what I do when I move, when I eat, when I wash my dishes, or bathe, or whatever I do. I try to just stay with that and not let my mind go think about other things.
I know you've spoken about how the mantra Buddho invokes in, say, a Thai person who grew up with it, almost the same emotional response as the word God might invoke in a Westerner who grew up in that cultural context. Although I may be misquoting, but I'm curious what you think about the efficacy of how effective it is for Westerners to use the mantra of Buddho, and what you might recommend as another skillful means to inspire faith for those who didn't grow up from a young age in a Buddhist context.
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't use Buddha much, really. For me, I use most of the time, it's just the body as my object of mindfulness. But sometimes when I have to use a mantra, I use anicca, impermanent, because I think I'm attracted to impermanence. Because as soon as I read the book that someone gave me about anicca, I fell in love with it. And also part of my experience when I was about 10 or 12 was to see a corpse, a friend who died from swimming, drowned in the pool. And so they have funeral service for him. He was the Seventh-day Adventist, so it was a Christian funeral. So we filed past the casket and look at the corpse. And then somehow struck me right away that this is going to happen to me also. And just not me, everybody else. I start to see the end game. See that everybody's going to end this way sooner or later. So more or less this kind of, I don't know, give me the understanding of anicca. But I wasn't overwhelmed or consumed by what I saw. I went on, continue on doing what I had to do, studying and so forth. But in the back of my mind, I know that things we're gonna end up. We're all gonna go into that casket one day, sooner or later. So I get so serious. So I get so so serious about acquiring all the things in this world. And eventually you're gonna die and you cannot take any, and you don't know where you're gonna go. I didn't know what's gonna happen to me then because I didn't study Buddhism deep enough to know something about the mind and about rebirth and so forth. But for me, to me, seeing life is temporary kind of makes me look at life as not so serious. What I mean.
Ajaan, thank you. During this period of COVID, many people in America and all over the world have lost their jobs or have quit their jobs, getting some more perspective. And I'm curious if you could say anything about actually how to organize one's time. If one does want to give more time to meditation, is there a specific way to practice, like a certain number of hours per day, or what do you recommend for people for organizing their own time?
Well, it depends on your ability to practice. If you can practice, then I think you will want to practice more. But if you cannot, then you'll find it more boring and you don't want to do it. So this is the problem for people, I think, when they try to meditate and they cannot do for long and they become boring and they're not getting any result. So they're not inspired. But if for someone who's lucky, maybe has developed a lot of mindfulness in past lives, to sit and just watch the breath can make them feel calm and happy, then they will want to do more meditation. So this cannot be something that you can recommend to each individual. Each individual has to find what he wants to do. If he's not successful in meditation, he might be discouraged and doesn't want to do much. But if he has some result, then he will be more inspired, encouraged to do more. And it all comes down to one word: mindfulness. This is the key to your success in meditation. So I would stress, if you haven't yet have any success in meditation, you can sit, but you still haven't yet experienced any calm, I think you should try to develop more mindfulness before you come to meditate, which you can do from the time you get up to the time you go to sleep. Try to focus on your body, movement, every movement of your body, every posture of your body. Just tie your mind with the body. Don't let your mind go somewhere else. We normally don't stay with the body for a long time. Right? We get up and we walk, and then when we start walking, we start to think about some other thing already. What the Buddha wants us to do is to keep the mind with the body, with every step when we walk, with every movement of the body. If you can force your mind to do that, you will have strong mindfulness. And when you meditate, you can focus on your breath and become calm real quickly.
Ajaan, that's very good advice. In your own case, you were able to actually meditate, contemplate death at a very young age, but many people, grown adults, and maybe even the closer they get to death, the more people are afraid of death. When do you actually teach recollection of death to people? When do you know that someone's ready?
Well, you just have to talk to them first. But normally, this is something I usually don't teach to anybody. Usually teach people the basics: dana, sila, bhavana. And then when they get to the level of bhavana, and when they're interested in the three characteristics of existence, then you can then talk about death, talk about aging, sickness, and so forth. But otherwise, you don't go and talk to anybody about this right away.
Ajaan, what would you say to a young person or an old person thinking of ordination? And what would you say to a monk or nun thinking of disrobal?
Well, there's a saying that goes like this: people in the inside want to get up, want to go outside, and people on the outside want to get inside. So the thing is, once you get inside, so how to stay inside. See? And the only way to stay inside is to be happy. If you're not happy, you cannot stay inside. And the only way to be happy when you're in robes is to meditate and to get the result of your meditation. So you should be practicing mindfulness from the first step you enter into monkhood. Don't be sidetracked by any other activity. Try to focus on developing mindfulness. And you need to be alone most of the time to do this. So you need to go to a forest monastery. I only stayed for 6 weeks at Bhagwan and already was anxious to get out from there. But I had to be there because I had to learn to wear the robes, how to go on bintabat, and also required to do some morning and evening chanting. But it was just not what I wanted, but I had to go through this ritual. But once I can get into the forest monastery, then once I finish my work, my bintabat and eating, then I can go back to my kuti. And that's what I do, just meditate, walking meditation or sitting meditation.
And Thanajan, what would you say to a young person thinking of ordination?
Good, do it. But just can you stay in it? That's the point. So you have to know what is expected of you when you ordain. It's not easy life, You might see, if you see the monk, you think it's easy life because all they do is just sit there and do a few chanting, and they already got invitation to go to house to eat and to enjoy anything, But for monks to meditate, this is not the way it is. Monk who meditate has to live quite in poverty, having nothing except the requisites of a monk, having a bowl, 3 pieces of rope, and a water strainer, and razor to shave your head, and needle and pins, thread and needles to fix your robe. That's all you have to have. And you have to practice Dutanga. You have to go on arms round, have to get up every morning and walk into the village. And you have to eat only once a day. Put all the food in your bowl. And in some forest monastery, they don't have anything else. Once you finish eating, that's it. No refreshment, no anything like that. All you have is water for drinking. But that's all your body needs. If you can do something like this, then I think you will be more successful. But if you still need to have teas and coffees and whatnot, cheese and whatever, then I think this can be harmful to you. Because even though it's allowed, but it's not. I think what was allowed in the Buddha's time was turned into something else. I think there was supposed to be medicine, things like the 5 medicine, like sugar, oil, honey, butter, or ghee, or whatever they call that. It's to help when you're sick. But now they don't. Monks are not sick, and they consume this thing more for pleasure than for looking up the body. So you become attached to this sensual pleasure, and you don't want to meditate.
Thanajan, on this topic of being a monk, how do you suggest that as monks in a country that's new to Buddhism, how do we keep the rules strictly, keep all of our rules, but at the same time hold them somewhat flexibly or hold them spaciously? Like in Thailand, the more strict you are, maybe the more people respect you. Whereas in America, it might be the opposite. The more strict you hold rules, sometimes people think, oh, this monk is attached to rules and are maybe uninspired. How do you do both? Be spacious and keep rules?
Well, the reason why we keep the rules is protect us, not to make other people respect us. That's not the goal. The goal is, the Vinaya is to protect the monks from misbehavior. Wants the monk to behave properly. So this will actually makes people respectful of them. What people respect us is because we have this monastic codes. So, but if people, maybe due to the understanding that rules is not good, then well, we probably will not be able to attract this type of people to join us. because especially in America, I think American despise rules, right? Despise mandates. American thrive on freedom, which I respect. Okay, I'm not arguing anything like that. But in training of the mind, you need rules. You need things to put a cage to your defilement, not your mind, but your defilements from going out and causing troubles to the mind. Because your goal is to bring the mind to stay put in one point. That's when you get real happiness, to meditate. So all these rules they're defined, were designed to discourage you from doing anything that doesn't contribute to your meditation practice. So, but people might not understand this if they don't really study and practice themselves. But rules in Buddhism, especially monastic code, is there to steer the mind of a monk toward meditation. That's what the rule is for, to stop the monks from going and doing other things. And as soon as they start to go do something, the Buddha said, no, you cannot do this. So he set up rules. But originally there was no rules when he first started the teaching, because all those who came to study with him became arahant. They became noble disciples. And they didn't want to do anything but meditate. So there was no reason to set up any rules, right? But later on, with people who joined the monastery because they think maybe they can do something, get something from it, and not knowing exactly what the purpose of being ordained for. Then they start to do things that the Buddha said, this is not right for you to do. So rules was one by one added. From when a monk starts to do something not that is harmful to the meditation, then the Buddha say, oh, you cannot do this.
Ajaan, you speak about the American mantra, fight for freedom, fight for freedom. And I'm curious if you could say more about like the principle of finding freedom through restraint and through, looking inwards, because that's not what freedom is.
Well, besides fight for freedom, this is another one also called the pursuit of happiness. This is where it is wrong. Happiness should not be pursued, because happiness should be realized or discovered within yourself. Yeah. That's what meditation is for you to come back to yourself and realize the true happiness within yourself. But delusion will tell you have to go after the sensual objects. That's where the word pursuit of happiness comes from. That's why people escape Europe, went to America to pursue happiness. Right? Because they go look for happiness outside of the mind, outside of themselves. This is natural for all delusional mind. Every delusional mind will think happiness is outside, not inside. It's only once in a while you come across a wise person like the Buddha who discovered that happiness is not outside, but inside yourself.
Ajaan, you speak about, I remember as a layman, I was so hungry to meet wise individuals like the one, like the Buddha, like the great teachers, or to hear teachings like the Buddha's, because in America, as you know, having lived here, we don't really have a really robust, say, monastic tradition of any kind. And yet in the West, in Europe, there still are, and to an extent in the US, Christian monastic orders. And I've heard some reference that maybe there were some mystics in those religions, like Meister Eckhart, who did realize some level of awakening, maybe. And I also recall a teacher saying that if one investigated the concept of God to the very end completely, that they might arrive at truth. What is your reflection on kind of, these other traditions, or if there is any possibility of resonance with the idea of God if taken it to its ultimate, conclusion and the deathless?
Well, I really am not expert on other religion or any other philosophy. But if I were to ask how I would define God, I would define nature. Nature is God. And the building blocks of nature is the 6 elements. The wind element, the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the knowing element, and the space element. These are the building blocks of all things. And they are the builder and they're also the destroyer. They are to their impermanent nature. Everything is built will eventually break down. Like the body is built from the 4 elements. Right? We have the earth, the water, the fire, and the wind element, forming the 32 parts of the body, plus the knowing element connected to it. So the knowing element then can use the body to go pursue happiness for the knowing element.
And would the nibbana element be separate from all of those, Thanajan?
It's in the knowing element. It's the knowing element. But that is once it has attained to nibbana, it stops connecting to anybody. It can exist alone by itself, happy with itself. So it doesn't need to have the body to go pursue happiness for it. So all the knowing elements still exist the same. The number is constant. For instance, if there are 1 billion knowing element, there will always be 1 billion knowing element, no more, no less. But that's only the change in the knowing element from enlightened to unenlightened.
Thanajan, can there be degrees of, say one's mindfulness grows and one detects, as my own practice has moved in life, I know I've felt sometimes a very strong calling in one direction, say it's what drew me to robes. And I don't know how to articulate it except something around maybe the voice of Dhamma or intuitive awareness or something like that. Where does that fit in? Is that the knowing element informed by wisdom? Is there a touch of the deathless in that? Where does that voice come from?
From your past. You have past lives. You have millions or countless past lives. And each life you might have experienced something which might remain in your mind and which can be the one talking to you from time to time. So we all might be in a past life, maybe we have met maybe a few Buddhas before, but we might not have yet learned the teaching to the level where we can become more, more advanced, let's put it that way. But we'll probably run into a lot of different teaching also, maybe some Christian teaching, some Muslim teaching in your past life. So all this can be accumulated in your mind. And they might come up like deja vu, right? We say deja vu.
Thank you.
Thanajan, there are some forms of Buddhism that say specifically that Nibbana is always here and that we just don't realize it. And there's a sutra in the Anguttara Nikaya that says the mind is luminous and it's just the kilesa that pass by as visitors. And I'm curious, is Nibbana always present?
If it's always present, then we should be in Nibbana right now.
No.
If it's present, it's been blocked by the clouds of delusion, let's put it that way. Once you can remove the clouds of delusion from your mind, then Nibbana will reveal itself. So it's our task to remove these clouds of delusion. by the practice of vipassana, with the support of the practice of samatha and the practice of sila. Then we will be able to remove the clouds of delusion from the mind. Once there are no longer clouds of delusion, then nibbana, enlightenment, full enlightenment will appear. It's in the mind, in our mind right now. It's just flipping the mind from delusional to become enlightened. So.
Thank you, Thanajan. You had mentioned like past lives. So past lives, future lives, rebirth, heaven and hell. These are things which come up all over the place in the Pali Canon. And it's something which in Thailand, many people just take for granted as a matter of faith. But it's something which many Westerners have a hard time understanding. How do you talk about rebirth to Westerners?
Well, they have to understand that the body and the mind are two separate entities. Okay, the mind is the master. The body is like the puppet. It's the mind who tells the body what to do. Before you can say anything, you have to think first, right? Before you can do anything, you have to tell, I want to drink, so you go and drink. If I want to eat, so it's the mind who tells the body what to do. Okay, but unfortunately, the mind is invisible. That's the problem. We cannot see the mind because the mind has no body like the body. But it's the mind that is working all the time, not the body. The body doesn't think. The body doesn't know anything. The body is like an automobile. Does an automobile think? I should be going to this or that place. No, the automobile will just sit there and wait for the driver to tell it what to do. So you have to understand this fundamental truth first, that the body and the mind are two separate entities. They just happen to combine at the time of conception. When half of the parts come from half of it comes from your father and half of it comes from your mother, which are the sperms and the eggs. When they join, then the knowing element coming to possess or coming to connect with. I'm not sure when or how this is connected, but this is when the mind coming to connect with the body. And then when the body comes out of the womb, then the mind can then start to tell the body what to do. Cry if you want something. Smile if you're happy, for instance. It's not the body doing this, it's the mind doing this to the body, through the body.
Thanajan, in terms of seeing through this automobile,
Yeah.
In terms of seeing through the body, I know as monastics we're encouraged to use Asubha practice and body contemplation a lot. I wonder how much you recommend a layman or laywoman do this, especially if they're in a committed relationship. Is there a place for Asubha practice, contemplation of the unattractiveness of the body for a lay practitioner? And if so, how would they regulate balancing that with a romantic committed relationship?
Only when they want to follow the 8 precepts. If they don't follow the 8 precepts, there's no need for them to contemplate on Asubha. See, only when they want to take the spiritual path, that's when they have to start contemplating on Asubha. Because if you don't, your sensual desire or your sexual desire will keep pulling you away from your spiritual path, pulling you back toward the sensual path. So that's when you want to develop Asubha. And when you ordain, the first thing you are taught during ordination is Asubha without you knowing it. The 5 objects, right, that you have to study right away. Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho. It's just a beginning of teaching you just the first 5 objects. But ideally, they want you to continue on after your ordination and go through the 32 parts. So this can reduce your sexual desire when you see the body as being unattractive. But other than that, don't worry about teaching other people. Worry about teaching about yourself first, how you can overcome your sexual desire. You know. But as far as lay person is concerned, we normally don't teach them Asupa. We teach them Dana or Sila first. If they're not keeping the 5 precepts, we teach them the 5 precepts. If they still like to find pleasure in vice like drinking, gambling, and entertainment, going to entertainment venue, we teach them they should avoid this first.
Ajaan, in line with the 5 precepts, I think most people in the West agree, are fairly willing to accept the first 4. The 5th one, especially when it comes to say, a common line one would hear in Western Dharma circles is just, what's wrong with a glass of wine? It's just a glass of wine. I'm not getting drunk or anything like that. What would you say to that reaction to the 5th precept? Like, how would you encourage someone, what is wrong with wine?
Well, what is wrong with one glass of wine? Leads to more glasses of wine. See, that's why you have Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's because they started with just one drink. But one drink will lead to the second, to the third, and fourth, and eventually come to it addiction. See? So to be safe is just not to touch it at all, because you never know when to stop when you start to take one drink. And you say, oh, never mind, one drink is now, another drink probably will be okay also.
And Tanajan, on the note of Asuba, I've heard some teachers say that the contemplation of the elements is a far more advanced practice than the contemplation of the unattractiveness of the body. And I've met some teachers who almost all they speak about is the 4 elements. What is your feeling of the difference in the aim and results of those 2 contemplations of the body, Asubha versus the elemental contemplations?
They have different purpose. Asubha is to get rid of your sexual desire. Why the 4 elements is to get rid of your delusion of seeing the body as a self. There's no self in the body. All there is just the 4 elements. So it's different purpose. And you need both. You need both in order to, you need to see the body as the 4 element in order for you to let go of your attachment to your body. So that when the time of death comes, you will not have any suffering when your body dies, because you see it's just 4 elements like an automobile. It's just made up of plastics, glasses, metals, and rubbers, for instance. So it's a different purpose there. But I'll continue on with the automobile analogy. You look at the automobile, sometimes you become impressed because it's so beautiful, like a Ferrari. But if you open up the hood, for instance, and take up all the covers and see the engine inside, then you say, oh, it's not that beautiful at all. So that's a super.
John, just maybe a couple more questions. So many people say that the human realm is the best realm for practicing Dhamma, but with global warming and cultures changing, everything westernizing and becoming less Buddhist all over the world, do you still, if someone did want to be reborn or does not achieve stream entry in this life, does it really make sense to want to be reborn as a human? Or should one aim higher, maybe go to a Deva realm where they still can learn Dhamma?
Well, it's not something like launching a rocket and point to the moon or to Mars. You cannot predict when will you be reborn as a human being again, because there are karmas that will come into play. All the karmas that you have accumulated in this lifetime will be determining where you will go next. You might not take a human birth for a while yet after you die. You might be existing as a spiritual being, a happy one or a sad one, depends on your good or bad karma. Until this karma more or less expire and they can no longer influence your mind, then maybe it's time for you to take a human birth. And taking a human birth doesn't mean you have to take a human birth on this earth. There might be thousands of other earths that are humans around that you can take up birth, and you don't know. See, do you think there's only one earth in this entire universe that has human being existing?
Tanjan, is it a matter of just a different world, like somewhere
That's
in the
right, a different earth, a different planet.
Okay.
There might be thousands of them. The problem is we cannot connect with them, so we don't think if they ever exist. But thinking of the possibility of the mind being able to travel through space and time, you know, by just a blink of an eye, the Buddha say, you're already there, you know, on another planet. You know. So I don't want to stress this point too much. It's just something that you can consider and think about. You know. But I think that there's a possibility that you can be reborn in a world or on Earth, on another Earth which is more advanced or more or less advanced than we are now. So eventually, since we are not gonna stop reborn, we will be reborn on an earth somewhere, on a planet somewhere, and continue on with our cravings, for instance. So it depends on what you have accumulated in this life. In this life, you have accumulated some desire for spiritual endeavor. So maybe in your next life, when you're reborn as a human, you might continue on this endeavor if you happen to come across a teacher or a monastery or some form of practice that align with what you like. You know. This is what causing you to become a monk, because maybe in your past life, this is what you have been used to doing before. How come not everybody doing the same thing as you do? That's because not everybody did the same thing that you did, right?
Ajaan, I think we maybe one more question, if we may.
Okay, go ahead. No problem with me. You can talk as long as you like.
Thank you. I'm wondering, you know, I think a goal, you know, so many of us practitioners have is, you know, obviously to end this cycle of rebirth and craving that you've so clearly articulated during this whole interview, and the suffering which we all experience like that, and stream entry, you know, that first taste of the deathless, certainly is a goal for me. I would wonder, I think that attainment gets underestimated in the West at times, and really kind of downplayed as fairly easy for people to access, to the point where there might be quite a bit of overestimation. What would Ajaan advise in terms of trying to move towards that goal, in terms of one essential piece of advice? And if one attained stream entry, how would one know? And would one remember? And you know what? Yeah.
It's not remembering, it's being. See. Being a Sotapanna is not remembering being a Sotapanna. Once you are Sotapanna, you don't forget. And the character of a Sotapanna is one who is not afraid of death. One who is not afraid of pain, not afraid of aging, sickness, and death. Because he had developed through wisdom that seeing that the body is not himself, he is the mind, who just happened to possess this body, that's all. So even if he has to take another human birth the next time, he will still have no fear of death. no fear of aging, sickness, and death. But he still has sexual desire because he hasn't yet got rid of that. So for Sotapanna, the next level is to develop the practice of Asupa, to be able to see at all times. Every time you see a body, he sees the rest, the whole 32 part, not just the part outside. You can go see right through into the body, under the skin, see the skeleton, see the intestine, see the heart, lungs, and so forth. Or see when the body dies, see the body as being a corpse. Then he will be able to get rid of his sexual desire. Then he will become an anagami. Then with that, he will no longer take a human birth anymore. That mind will no, because there's no interest for him to take a human birth, to take a body, because he has no desire to have any sexual pleasure anymore.
Ajaan, I do think we have to go. We also have to go.
I know, yeah, we have to go to do your morning duty now. This evening for me here, this morning for you must be what, 9 o'clock, so about 6 o'clock now for you.
But Ajaan, I'm so grateful to have, I've met you a few times in person, as is Ajahn Kovilo, and every time I find I'm very moved, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time to speak with us today.
Ajahn Kovilo, did you ever come to Thailand before?
I lived in Thailand for 6 years, and I came.
6 years. You came to see me also? I didn't remember. Okay, one time. By the way, if anybody, this will be put on your YouTube page, right? So maybe if you know the link, you can send it to me. Maybe I will post it on my Facebook page in English. And for whoever listening to this talk, if they want to follow my teaching, I have Zoom meeting in English every Tuesday night at the same time, at 8 p.m. Thailand time, every Tuesday night to about 10 o'clock, about 2 hours. And people can come in and ask questions. And also I have another live Q&A on Sunday, tomorrow, during about 11:30 Thailand time, during the day. So it must be about what, 8 o'clock at night for you. You have about 3 hours after me. So this is not using Zoom, it's just me with the camera live, and people sending the question by typing in the commentary section. And I read it, I read the question, and then I answer the questions. So just in case if people want to ask me a question, they can still come in and ask me on Sunday evening for your time, or 11:30 or so my time. And another one is Tuesday night at 8 p.m. my time, which is about 5 p.m. Pacific time. 5 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, it's well worth getting up that early for those who are listening, and you can find that all on Ajaan Suchart's Facebook page.
Yes, and you have to search the word Ajaan Suchart Abhijato, Dhamma for the asking.
Ajahn,
Right?
can we pay respects?
Sure, please go. Please do. I hope you pay more attention to your practice and trying to teach people. You can teach them if they're interested, but just only teach what you know. Don't teach more than what you know. And try to get yourself enlightened first, if you haven't yet been enlightened. If you're enlightened already, then there's no problem.
Much done, Ajahn.
Okay, nice to see you, nice to talk to you, and hope everything goes well for you in America.
Thank you so much, Ajahn.
All right. Goodbye for now.